Hello guys, this is Gabriel falling from Team SK Gaming.
This is Talk to Thorin, and I've got Maniac here from LDLC. So, before we get into the LDLC part of this discussion, I have to ask, when you were last playing on the top level, was in Titan, and this was the team where basically people to some degree have forgotten you a bit because they remember there was a French shuffle, right? But the difference is you weren't shuffled to a team, you basically just left a team. And that was kind of the end of your playing career at that point in time until you came back more recently in 2016. You came back, you were playing Rogue, then Millennium, now LDLC. So initially, when you left Titan, did you actually think like you're just done with playing entirely?
Well, I have to be honest, and I didn't leave. I was removed in 2015. Yeah, I was removed back then. And I remember thinking that I thought I would find another team, straight after being removed from Titan. But looking backwards, I know that my expectations back then were too high. So what happened is that I got a few offers that I didn't really consider. And then time went on and I realized I wouldn't get the type of opportunity I was hoping for. And it was already a few months after. So that's when I realized, well, either I'm going to go to a lesser team or lesser than what I expect, or I'm going to have to do something else, basically.
So you did come and you were with us on the analysis desk right after this period, and you did a few events. Here's the thing. As far as I know, behind the scenes, there was no reason that you wouldn't have been hired for more. You know, it's not like events were like, oh, it wasn't good or there's any problems. So I have to figure, at very least, you would have been hired for some more events. Was that something that you just decided you didn't want to do anymore? I mean, obviously the EnVyUs thing came along. Was there a reason why you chose not to go into the analysis world?
Well, to be honest, I had a good time doing some analysis gig. I really liked it. I thought people were nice, and I thought the job was interesting. And indeed, other offers came after that. But as you said, the timing was that at the end of 2015, EnVyUs asked me if I wanted to coach for them. And I was really interested by the job. I thought it was fascinating, and it also came along with my academical background. So I really wanted to try that. And because I decided to put Envy first, I declined a few other offers as analyst. So basically, even events stopped asking me because I refused a few because I wanted to put the priority on Envy, and that's why I never really came back. But I would have because I really liked it.
Oh, okay. Well, okay. Now that we've seen what EnVyUs was like for all of 2016 as well, this team had a lot of problems, whether you were the coach or not. Like, I mean, they eventually, all the players even had to admit, this team's got all fucked, basically. But when you were the coach, the problem is the timing when you came in. They clearly were having some issues, they weren't going to be the number one team. There was some problems there, and around this time, it's not that they actually didn't go super downhill during your time, but I remember they just. It looked like from the outside nothing changed. So what were the struggles? What were the challenges of being a coach of EnVyUs? I mean, I have to say, by the way, if I had to pick some team lineups of players that should be the least coachable, I'd probably pick that one. That'd be my top 5.
Well, here's the thing. So first of all, I think that the basic idea on which I was hired was wrong. Looking backwards, because basically. They came to me and BK came to me and he explained me his vision of how the team was supposed to work. Yep. And I only realized too late that they just expected me to say that in a very strict and authoritative way. Know what I mean? I wasn't really
You had to repeat his concept basically.
Yeah, that was the problem. I didn't really have a space to maybe introduce some new concepts or my perspective on their problems. It was more like some of them had figured what were the problems, what were the solutions, and I was more like the authority voice to say it louder and clearer. So that was the one first problem. The other, as there were many problems in my opinion, but yeah, indeed the team was in a difficult place, not only a CS point of view, but also there were troubles between the players. So basically every little conflict were spiraling into huge problems. So I think I kind of agree with you. It was a very hard team to coach. Truth is, I also didn't have any experience, no matter that I actually worked as a work psychologist, but this is a completely different scenario, and I didn't have any experience. So I guess someone with more experience would have handled it better than I did. That's for sure. But I didn't feel like I was very really listened to or trusted, and they didn't feel like I was doing much. So after few months, we both sides realized, well, this is not really going anywhere. So, and I wanted to go back to playing, but I have some regrets on this because I thought I could have brought them more, but in my opinion, it was both sides at fault. Like I didn't have the experience and I didn't do what I could have done, but they were not really listening, and there were too many problems. So that every time you try to tackle one problem, there's another one. You know, it's like everything is a little bit mixed, and it was really hard to handle.
So, if you noticed, okay, obviously Kirishima was the origin of this famous meme now that is whenever a player that people think is good gets removed from a top team, you know, they were the problem. And people say, even though I know they're joking, there was, when this first came about, it wasn't just a joke. People kind of meant it as like a little bit of truth. Like they use it when they think someone's been unfairly removed, you know, like, oh, well, maybe he had a little issue, but, you know, the team had bigger issues. And the reason it's a really complicated issue is that you can't, as an outsider, resolve it like almost mathematically and say, well, if he then plays really good in another team, like for example, Cajun B's very good in North. Now, that doesn't mean when he was in Astralis that everything was fine and, you know, he shouldn't have been the person removed. So were there issues with Kirishima? Like when you look back now, would you think it was justified to remove him?
Well, what I can say is that when I was brought into the team, they already had problems with Kirishima involved. So basically I missed a part of the story that I cannot talk about because I wasn't there.
Okay.
But I know for a fact that they were criticizing him on his involvement. They thought he didn't invest himself enough. And it was the case already before I joined the team. And apparently it didn't change, or in their perspective, it didn't change when I joined. So that was one of the reasons they removed him, because they were expecting him to put more effort. That was one side. Then he also didn't feel great in the team. And I think he was, that's just my hypothesis, but I think he was influenced by the environment. Like there were a lot of troubles between players, there were tensions, and for talking with him, I know he was influenced by that, and he didn't feel good. I mean, we can say it, like he said it even himself, like he didn't feel good in team, he didn't feel like he was a team. So his performance was also affected by that. So I would say in their eyes, removing him was making sense because he wasn't playing or he wasn't invested enough. They gave him a warning, 2 warnings, then he didn't change, and then they thought, oh, okay, we have to remove him. But where I think there was a big problem is that in their eyes, or some of them, they thought removing Kyo was actually removing the main problem of the team, and they kind of overlooked all the other issues that basically led them to having like the results they had back then. So, but the fact that Kirishima is now playing better and having success in another team is, like you say, the proof that one player that's not really good doing well in one team, there might be the result of other factors. He goes to another team, there's another environment, another work ethic, and then suddenly he plays good. But I'm not going to say that Kirishima was perfect. I mean, he had some flaws in EnVyUs back then. But just removing him thinking that would fix everything, then that was a mistake in my opinion. But
okay, I found it really interesting that when you described how you became the coach, that it was NBK came and he had this kind of vision for the team, because that's actually been my experience of the EnVyUs team from almost the entire time they've had the team. Even when they first did that first French shuffle where NBK went to the lineup and they came into the LDLC org, is that if you ever talk to him behind the scenes, he's always the one trying to come up with like the solution as to whatever the problem is. Like, okay, here's what we need to do. We need to change this role, or what we need to do is change everything. We need a coach, or we need like the tactical style has to change, or Happy has to change. He's always trying to come up. He's like a very optimistic guy. He always thinks it's possible somehow to change things. But the problem I always saw in that team is, if it doesn't matter if one person thinks that, everyone to some degree has to, if not agree with the idea, at least do it, you know, execute the plan. And if I ever looked at the other personalities in that team, like Apex, okay, seems like a very good teammate, but he seems like the guy where he goes along with the plan. He's not going to say, well, no, I think we should do this instead. Feels more like he's like, okay, this is the plan. Like, yeah, we're all in on this, you know. I guess in that sense, it's an entry fragger mentality. You're supposed to go along with whatever the plan is. You kind of give up some control in that sense. But the problem is, first of all, Happy is someone who has entirely his own ideas about the game, and it's very difficult to convince him that those ideas aren't correct. So it's going to be hard to get him to change his mind totally. And then in terms of Kenny, to me, Kenny S is like, it's totally makes sense to me that he's an AWPer, because he has the mentality of like, no, my level just has to be higher. I just have to kill more with the crosshair. Like, you know, he's not really thinking of the game in that other sense, you know. So with NBK having this approach, like, Do you think his plans ever were enacted in the team? Like, was he able ever to get that across? Because it looked in a lot of the time in EnVyUs, including your era, like they kind of just went around in circles to some degree.
Well, to be honest, I think the ideas that he had, they were right, in my opinion. Like he has a vision of how a professional team is supposed to work, and we are talking work ethics, we are talking communication between teammates, dedication. Like I think his ideas were good. Also, I have to say that like NBK is basically a very clever person. He has been on the winning team for a very, very long time, that doesn't come with luck. Like he has some kind of experience from that. But the problem was, and that's once again just my interpretation, but the problem was when they were going downhill and NBK came with his ideas, and also obviously Happy came with ideas, is that they were extremely rigid on if someone was to deviate from the plan, if you know what I mean. Basically, every little mistake or sidestep would be a huge deal, and everyone was overreacting because of the environment and the tensions. So it was basically good ideas that were executed in how you say, not the best way. But that was my interpretation. They were much more focused on making sure they are doing things right instead of just doing them right. You know, and every time someone was sidestepping, it was a huge discussion and oh, this is not possible. We absolutely have to do it like this. You can't do that. Instead of just having a plan, going for it, and accepting that there would be some mistakes and there would be some things to correct. But they were making it too big of a deal out of it. But once again, I was there for a few months, so I didn't quite catch the year before that. So I don't know if there was like a ground for all those overreactions, but that's how I would explain it.
So you pointed out at the beginning that it's not as though you came into the team and they were like, listen, you're the coach, tell us what to do. We'll give, basically they didn't give you a full chance. Like if you're the manager of a football team, even if you lose, you at least want that guy to have his full vision put forwards, and then if it actually failed or succeeded. If you kind of tell him, I mean, this happened to Carrigan, I know, in Australis at the end. If you're kind of telling him like, well, you can be the leader, but we want to have a say in what you do as well, and if we don't like something, we're going to veto it, then the guy who's the leader feels like, I never really got to do my whole plan. We don't know if my plan would have failed or succeeded. So what I want to tie this into is kind of a last topic on the EnVyUs topic. It goes like this. You seem like a pretty smart guy. I know when you were in Titan, this is a team that played very good fundamental Counter-Strike, whether you had the pieces to win or not, you certainly had like a good system. Do you actually think force buying all the time on CT side when you're losing rounds is the correct approach in CSGO? Because they still did this when you were the coach. So was it anything to do with the coach there? Did you agree with it?
I think force buying is very, how you say, it depends on the situation. Basically, the idea behind force buying is that, first of all, they consider themselves good pistol players, which basically EnVyUs has been famous for a long time, winning pistol rounds. And also, it kind of depends on how close the enemy team is to basically the breaking point in an economical way. So maybe, in my opinion, where they pushed it too far in the sense that sometimes they would win pistol force buy that would not even put the other team in an echo. So basically, it's just you're taking a risk, but the reward is not really there. Maybe you're going to win the round one time out of 3 or 4, but even if you win it, they are not going to break in terms of economy. So you take a huge risk that doesn't really come with the reward. And the other situation is where you're very far back in the score. Basically, you're losing, I don't know, 2-12, or you're losing 3-12, 3-13. Then it's not like you really have a choice. You think we have to win rounds now, because we cannot let them go to 14, 15. Yeah. So I wouldn't say that they really overdid it. At least when I was coaching them, every matches that they did that was either because they were close to break the economy, and this is a type of game that 1 or 2 rounds can totally swing around everything, because suddenly they are eco, you have a weapon, you can win 2 or 3 rounds off of it. Or it was because they were getting destroyed so hard that whatever it takes, they had to win a round. They had to win another round because they just couldn't. I think it's very hard psychologically to say, okay, we are down 4-13, let's do a full eco. It's very hard to do that because you basically give them the 4-14, and then you only have 2 rounds as a bonus. So those were the 2 big situations where they would force. For the rest, I don't think they did it so much in other situations.
after EnVyUs, after this period where you finished as the coach, as I mentioned, you had these two teams you played in. I mean, technically three if you count the Platinum mixed team, but two real teams that you played in was Rogue, the international team, and you played in Millennium. So during this period, I mean, you kind of addressed it before. Like you realized you kind of had to take a step down and kind of like build your way back up again as a player. Was it a hit to your ego to have to go and play in kind of these lower teams, that aren't going to go to the biggest tournaments? And most people are going to think on the outside, like, oh, maybe that's just kind of the end of his career. Like he'll just play on the fringes, sort of.
Yeah, well, okay, let's put it this way. I'm always honest with everyone about this. One of the reasons I got kicked from Titan back in 2015 was because I was behaving really bad and I was investing as much effort as I should. So basically my level went down and it was my fault. And it's something that I have hardly forgiven myself, that basically I wasted such an opportunity. So that long period of time where I had no team or I was trying to build international lineups, I was giving a lot of energy to try and have a project that I could invest it in. It kind of gave me, how you would say, a sense of dedication. It kind of reminded me that if I really want to do that, if I want to go back to be a professional player, there will be sacrifices and there will be a lot of energy invested before I can get any kind of reward. And I accepted it. And basically I took almost every opportunity I had to show people that I still had something. I still had some kind of talent. I still had some understanding of the game. I could still have impact when I'm playing. And that was in that kind of logic that I invested myself 200% in every project I could have, because I knew, and I was very aware of it, I knew that most of the people and even most of the players had absolutely no respect for me anymore. I mean, maybe they thought I was a clever player, but they probably thought that I was bad. I couldn't kill anyone anymore, and I knew it. I was completely aware of it. So I just took every chance I could to be on a server, be on an official match, have people see me frag, see that I am still there. And that was kind of my mindset. So yes, it did hurt my ego a little bit because, a year before in Titan, I was in every big event. I went to every major, made major playoffs, I've made podiums, I've won tournaments. So yes, it did hurt a little bit. But since I consider that I fucked up, if I can say it this harsh way, I wasted my chance in Titan. So if I want to really do it, then I have to go through it. I deserve it, and I have to earn it back. I have to earn back the opportunity that I wasted.
So when you were in this Rogue team, it was a really weird lineup because the guys in the team, okay, some of their names aren't that big, but it felt like it was, if you consider your own position, it was actually a team where the players are probably better than the team. It's like where it was beginning, where it's starting out in terms of like their opportunities could be better. If we were in a world where everyone was from the same country and nothing separated you except skill. I mean, some of those guys who were the Bulgarians, they were absolutely a team on the rise the year before, and we'd already seen on some LAN performances. But the problem is, if you're going to only play in a team from Bulgaria, you're not going to be in the major final. It's not going to happen. Whereas then you've got, and they also had that whole situation that kind of handicapped them with that player who was like getting VAC banned and stuff, and really screwed them. Then you have the situation with Cadian, where I've always said, I realise because of Cadian's personality rubs people the wrong way. It's always a famous thing that a lot of people want to, just because they don't like him, to say he's a bad player. But I've always said he is definitely not a bad player. I've seen him play in many teams, and he absolutely can contribute. And he's better than his reputation, put it that way. So what did you think of this project when you put it together? Like, what was the concept? Like, where did you think it could go?
Well, basically, the Rogue project was the result of a lot of testing players. I remember back then I had the Headshot by my side and Glaze. Those were the two first person. Then we were playing with other players. I remember we played with Skitten and Spitfire. We were doing some tests. We tested different players. And then Cadian came to Glaze and he asked him to ask me basically, me and Tensky, we would like to join this project. So I remember thinking that on the paper, just on skill level based, that was really interesting because I also consider Cadian to be a good player. We can talk about his personality later if we need to, but I mean, just when it comes to CS, I think Cadian can be a good player. He can be an impactful player. He's a little bit of that crazy type of AVP that can win rounds by himself because he has a little bit of arrogance in his playstyle. I considered Tensky to be an experienced player because Tensky got removed from Dignitas, or what used to be Dignitas, but by this time they had already shown promises and they already had good result against tier 1 teams. So for me, it was a no-brainer. I could have the experience with Tensky and the firepower with Cadian. Also, it wasn't quite clear if I was going to be the in-game leader or if Cadian would be, because he used to be. So I saw a lot of upsides. Then I put the lineup together. We started working. Obviously, we found Rogue, which is an organization that I found and negotiated with them. Put the team together, started working, and the first feelings were extremely good. I think we quickly came to a decent level. We had this power LAN where we lost 2-1 to Dignitas, basically North. So the beginning was promising, but then when we faced the first difficulties, everything fell down. So that was a little bit unexpected.
Okay. Like, one of the weird things is, now that you're in LDLC and you've reunited with Existence, everyone's going to think from the outside who doesn't know the French-Belgian scene that, oh, well, these guys played together in the past, you know, they must always have loved each other, like, you know, it makes sense they'd reunite when, you know, they're both trying to come up again. But one of the interesting things is, this is a story that never got out into the public, because here's the thing, it wasn't EnVyUs, you know, it wasn't like some huge team where everyone would find the drama out. But the story I heard behind the scenes was really confusing, because it sounded like when Existence was kicked from G2, and when, you know, initially there was like talks about where will he go, will he retire, will he keep playing, and then initially the story I actually heard was like, oh, actually Existence, actually there's a team that's going to be LDLC, that's Maniac and some other guys, and then later on I heard this story that, oh no, now Existence is going to be in that team, and then suddenly the lineup comes out and it is Existence in LDLC, but there's no Maniac. So the story, at least as far as I was aware, was along the lines of like, did Existence sort of kick you out of a team that you were making, or just decide that you couldn't be in it? I mean, it sounds like it.
Yeah, it's basically what happened, but that kind of needs some context. So first of all, it is true that LDLC was talking with me before Existence got removed from G2. So I had a few talks, and there were plans that I would basically come into the old LDLC wide lineup and try and help them basically improve. That was there, but that Existence got removed from G2, and they offered him to join the project, which is absolutely logical. I guess if you're LDLC, you have the chance to get Existence on board, then you're gonna try and go for it. Then Existence had the choice to work with me, but because of the issues we've had in Titan at the end of Titan, he didn't want me in. Basically because he didn't know that I was a different person, or he thought I was the same type of person that I was at the end of Titan. So this is basically why he didn't take me in the team. Like we even talked together at this point where he would tell me that I did not pick you not because of your level, not because I think you're bad, but because of some issues that we've had in Titan. I cannot afford to have them in LDLC again. And it was mainly about the attitude and the work ethic, and because he needed people that always wanted to get better, that were working really hard, and that didn't have the kind of flaws that I could have at the end of Titan. So that was the main reasons why Existence didn't pick me up back then.
Okay, so then in this iteration of LDLC, we had, okay, you joined the team now, but then there was a similar kind of drama where it's like, behind the scenes, Existence thought RPK was going to join, and his old Very Games teammate's going to come back, and then they're going to make this and then obviously he goes to EnVyUs, and then you come in. Was it always going to be you and RPK join? Did you get the spot instead of RPK? How did that work out?
I'm going to be honest, I don't really know. All I know is, or rather all I am aware, is that I wasn't really the first plan. That the fact that I joined LDLC is basically a chain of events that came in my favor. So I don't exactly know what was the first ID Existence had, because we knew that this super team was going to happen, and I guess everyone was making plans as to, I'm going to try to pick this player or that player. And I know that Existence was counting on RPK. And then I think the fact that XMS got picked up by Envy kind of left him without a player, basically. Because, you know, not only does he not get RPK that he was hoping for, but also XMS is going away to EnVyUs. So then they came to me, and I was very humble because I'm completely aware that I was not the A plan, but it doesn't matter to me. What matters to me is that I got this opportunity, and now I dedicate 500% of all my energy to prove myself worth of it, basically.
Okay. So one of the interesting things, this is another example of where I've noticed actually not that much stuff gets out of the French scene. Like you get some pieces, like obviously you get reports about players, but because people have to translate the interviews and stuff, actually all the juicy gossip and drama doesn't really get out in the way it does like in the NA scene, for example. Everyone knows exactly what went on and who cut who and who hated who. So one of the weird things is people will think from the outside, looking at the fact that like EnVyUs still got some pretty good players. Like they kind of won out on the deal here. They got RPK, they got Scream, they got XMS, who many people thought was the best player in LDLC. LDLC, you joined. They ended up again having to sort of reset to some degree. People will think, right, okay, Existence just lost completely in this French shuffle. He didn't play any of the cards right. He didn't know what he was doing. But I actually heard behind the scenes that a number of players who were good players who were in EnVyUs, players who potentially, if you just took the LDLC and EnVyUs teams and made them into like the best players, and you ignored all relationships, that this team could have happened basically. And I think Happy even said in an interview that he had planned to potentially work with Existence. But what I'd heard was that Existence has this vision for LDLC that really is. It sounds incredibly ambitious, I have to say, and people will think it's crazy, which is that even if a player is actually much better than a player that might be in a team like LDLC now, like they've done a lot more in the French scene, if there's someone who's really set in their ways, like either in terms of how they think about the game or they're only going to play one role that they want to play, that Existence actually didn't want to make a team like that. Even if it could be, like the best of the rest players left over, he wanted to make a team where it's like, it's going to be his vision for the game, and he's going to, and if that means you have to take a lesser player, but you can mold him into your system, this is what he's going for. Is this anything you've heard?
Well, I cannot really comment on what he would do if a really better player would show up, because I have no idea. But all I know is that I think LDLC as a team was a very important step in Existence's career, because when he got removed from G2, obviously it's never easy to get removed. You have to ask yourself a lot of questions about what have you done wrong, what could you do better. And I think I can say now that in LDLC he has found himself kind of a new breath, a new life. I think he's a very much more aggressive player right now. He has much more confidence in himself because he's also surrounded by people who trust him. I think that's very important, because obviously getting removed from G2 means that there was some kind of lack of trust at some point, or trust either in his play as a player or in his game sense as a leader in game. But now in LDLC, he's surrounded by players who trust in him, who basically would follow him anywhere. And I think it gives him a lot of power, but power in a good way, not like power in a bad way, but it gives him like confidence and it gives him trust. And I can see that he has transformed himself as a player. He is right now a much better player than he was when I was playing with him in Titan. That is for sure. Because he learned from his mistake in G2. He's much more aggressive. He's a little bit more selfish as well, in a way. That before he would be the kind of example who focuses only on the team, like team concept, trying to think of strategy, making the best play possible. But he would kind of lose the focus on himself. Now he's much more focused on himself. He wants to make the difference as a player. And I think that's one of the reasons why he's better now and he's performing better. Now I know that he's not really into this mentality of removing a player as soon as another better player would be available. He sees things much more like if one of his players has a flaw or has something that he has to improve, and he tries to help him do that, and he gives him maybe a warning, 2 warnings, 3 warnings, and there is still no improvement, then maybe he would consider removing someone. But he wants to push his teammates to the limits, basically, but in a good way, like make everyone the best player they can be before he actually thinks of switching players. At least that's how I feel it.
Since he made that famous statement when Titan was actually kind of like on the way down, like he would never retire until he won a major. I mean, people have to realize, by the way, it's not like that's like he now can't ever retire. It's like a bold statement, it's kind of like here's my ambition, here's my goal. But even so, if you look now, being in LDLC, it does sound like kind of a crazy statement. Do you think that's really? Do you think he still believes that that's possible, and that this somehow you can get back up to the top level with LDLC?
I think he does. Obviously, I'm not qualified enough to say if that's completely absurd or if there is a little bit of truth in that. But I think he does believe in the team. I know that he feels we have made a lot of improvements in the last 6 weeks, basically from the point I joined the team. Our practice results are good, I'd say encouraging, and I think he believes that this team can fight with the tier 1 at some point. He really believes in that. I don't think, but then again, from fighting against the tier 1 to winning a major, there is a important step, that's for sure. But I think that, in my opinion, the most difficult part is to step from this kind of tier 2 pool of decent and good teams to suddenly a team that can really compete on a regular basis against the tier 1. And this is the kind of leap of faith that we are trying to do right now. That's where I would put us right now. We are probably a decent tier 2 teams, but then again, we have to jump and we have to confirm good results against tier 1, and we have to stop losing 14-16 or overtime, or we have to start taking maps off of tier 1 teams. This is where I would put us.
When towards the end of the time in G2, like you could see when Shock started having some input in the tactics and stuff, and actually this is when Existence individually started to play a lot better, and in fact you saw like much better numbers out of him. But now that he's coming to LDLC, as you say, again, the individual focus seems to be there. The funny thing is, at the time, a lot of fans who only followed CSGO were like, oh, I thought this guy was, they thought he was like an MSL, he's the good tactician, but he's a terrible player, and the job is just to be so good at the tactics, it doesn't matter that you're not good at the game. But all the people I know who are experts from Source told me, oh no, this actually makes sense. Like, when he was in Very Games and Titan, first of all, he used to have such amazing lineups. He did just go, oh, okay, I'll take this role that's not about fragging. And, I've got some of the best fraggers in the world, so I don't need to. And he said also, even then in the later years, okay, so then when you have Kaylee and Kenny S, well, you're not going to try AWPing like you used to in Source. Why would you? You've got two of the best AWPers in the world. And then later on, you get RPK back, but he hasn't played the game in a year or more, Now you have to put some of your attention in helping him in the game and help him out on some of his spots and stuff. So what do you actually think now that he's in a position where he can play as an individual player? What is Existence like as an individual player? Like, can he be as good as people say he was in Source? Is he a different type of player in CSGO? What do you think?
Well, the truth is I have only played CS Source for like 8 or 9 months, so I don't have a huge understanding or comprehension of how good he was in CS Source. All I know is he was one of the best players back then. But I am indeed impressed by how he's playing right now, and like you explained it very well, the difference is his focus and his perspective. He dedicates basically equal time right now into finding new tactics for the team and trying to resolve issues that we can have on a tactical point of view, that he spends time trying to find individual tricks. And also when it comes to roles, now he has the tendency to also put himself into good situations. Like you said, back then when we were in Titan with Kali and Kenny and Apex, I mean, he had 3 huge firepower next to him. So it kind of sometimes made sense to maybe be the bait, or maybe throw the flash, or maybe, I don't know, have this not so interesting role, but to make sure that we win the rounds. Now he kind of put himself into situations where he can win the rounds on himself. And that's a total shift of perspective. He is a completely different player than he was when I was playing in Titan, where at some point he was fitting this MSL profile, kind of not really fragging much, but controlling everything when it comes to the tactic and having really good ideas. But now he's not satisfied with it anymore. Now he wants to win games on his own if he can. He's much more aggressive. He takes way more risks. And I cannot really explain how or why he transformed himself like this, but I do believe that with his perspective right now, he can become even better, and he can be one of the best players again. I don't know if he's going to reach the CSS type of dominance that he had, because obviously there is a lot more concurrence. There's a lot
Sure.
more other good players right now. But I do believe he can be a lot better than what people would expect of him.
So in CS:GO, he is probably the most famous example of what people think of as the old school type of in-game leader. The guy who you design the tactic, it has to work this way. There's all these components to it. Everyone has a job, and everyone has to do that job exactly. And in fact, this is what some of the guys from G2 basically told me. Basically, is one of the reasons they didn't want to play with him anymore. Is that they think that style goes too far. You know, like nowadays, you've got to kind of let a player do what he wants to some degree. And they also thought that it's like too scientific an approach, that you can't map out everything that's going to happen in a game, and you can't always know in this exact scenario. So clearly, we do see teams that are very good tactically in this respect. Is the style of leadership and the tactics in LDLC, are they super precise at this? Is it as extreme as what people think of from the years gone past?
No, it isn't anymore. And the comment that you've just made about you cannot control everything, I know for speaking with him that Existence has also come to that realization that it is nowadays impossible or almost impossible to have tactics that cover every possible scenarios and to have a scripted answer for everything that happens in a round. That's not possible anymore. So as a player now, you have to accept that sometimes your plan will basically disappear because something is happening in the round, and you have to react, and it's kind of your instinct that comes into play, and you have to win the round just because you know how to act in chaos and you know how to organize something from scratch. So in that way, our playstyle now is kind of a mix between very well thought and well executed tactics. But I would say that the core is much looser than it used to be, at least when I was playing in Existence back then in Titan. I think he now has more of an approach where every player is supposed to be able to make a difference in a classic round. Now we are talking T, for example.
Sure.
He expects that every player in the team has the potential to win the rounds on himself on a classic. Would it be because you're doing a boost with your teammate, or because you're asking for a pop flash, or you have worked on a one-way smoke, or you know how to use a timing because two of your teammates are doing a lot of noise on A, so you know you have a timing on B. So those type of tiny scenarios, everyone in the team is supposed to be able to exploit them and win the rounds on themselves. I mean, that's what we talk about before the practice. We say, we are going to a practice, take risks. If you can win a round on yourself, do it. If everyone is supposed to be able to do that. And once we get that, once we know how to win classic rounds based off of tricks, or based off of good clutches at the end, or based off a good power play management, once we get there, and then we can add a few well-executed and well-thought tactics, that's when, in my opinion, you are becoming a very hard team to play against. Because basically it's hard to counter your tactics because you don't really rely on your tactics firsthand. You just basically win rounds off of classic setups. And then once you win one or two rounds, then you can come in with tactics, but then the enemy is already reacting and not acting anymore because they are losing a few rounds. So obviously when you lose in CSU, you have to react, you're not really acting, you're reacting. So
Sure.
that's how we see things right now. That's how we try to practice.
So in this team then, the reason I set that comment up is because another thing people think from the past is that if you are the guy who has the vision and you're kind of like the director of the movie, you know, you're going to tell everyone where to go and what you want them to do. It's true that those types of people in general, unless they really, really respect someone and kind of like think the same way, they don't really usually want to give up any control to anyone else and kind of let them have a say. You know, they kind of want to be like, no, like trust that if you give me the information, I'll make the good calls. Are you in any way involved as like a secondary caller in this team? Is there any kind of setup like that?
I think it's a plan that I become like would you say, a co-leader, I guess. It could be a plan, but right now I'm much more focusing on being the best player I can be on an individual level. Because when I came back to LDLC, I had not been in a professional team for a long time, and I dedicated all my energy just to step up as a player, focus on myself. But I think it could be good for the team and probably for me individually that I have some influence in the tactics, of course, because I I kind of have some experience in the game, and I like to think that I understand the game, or rather the fundamentals. But also, Existence is also open to suggestions. Like, for example, I know that Alex, he's a very clever player. He understands the game as well. He has good feeling, good instincts, and if he gives Existence an opinion or a tactic that we can do, Existence is very open to that. So it could probably work with me. And once I feel that on an individual level I am back to, or I am where I should be, then I will probably help him out with that. But that's kind of a second focus for me.
So in this team, let me just go back a tap a second. So in the early days of when you joined the team that became Titan, basically after the first French shuffle, in the first few months, I remember you yourself, I've even seen you in interviews, said that like your level wasn't good, or you kind of like you were maybe a bit lost in the team, like your identity wasn't, you didn't have the role set properly for yourself. But we saw, especially when it got to the spring of the next year in 2015, you started to perform really well, especially as Kenny had kind of his problems when like he stopped being, by far the best player. This was when you really seemed to blossom as an individual player and kind of find your role and find things you could consistently be good at. Are you trying to be the same kind of player now? Are you trying to do similar roles? What are you trying to do individually in LDLC?
Well, in terms of roles, I think I am now close to where I was in Titan, which basically I am the anchor as CT. I hold the small sites on my own a lot of times, and I can lurk as T as much as I want to. So in terms of positions, I am where I was in Titan back then. But I think the main difference between now and Titan was, or rather is, that I will not be satisfied until I am the best. I know it sounds very silly and cocky to say, but that's just how I'm seeing things now. And one of the big mistakes I did in Titan was to be too much self-satisfied and thinking, okay, that's it. I have a good level. I am a good player now. That's enough. I can just go to Lance and be good because I'm good. That was a mistake I did, and I'm not going to do anymore. I'm always going to, if I can go and have 25 kills in a game, then I want to have 26. I want to have 27, 28, 29. I want to always improve. But yeah, if I can go back to that type of level, I would like to. I want to help win games on my own. I don't want to be a support player that I could be at some point in Titan, where I was basically just giving good ideas and good advices, and I was missing people. One of the main changes that I have made recently is that I'm working a lot more on my skill, my pure aim, because I guess everyone would agree about me at some point that they consider me a clever player, but my skill was not enough. Basically, I would understand the game, but I would not have, this capacity to just like headshot two people instantly. I would rather go for the spray and go for the 4 hits in the body. That's something I have decided to completely change a month ago. Maybe it's a detail, but I have started to practice only in HS mode, deathmatch. There's no more spraying for me. I only try to go for the headshot, and I can feel the difference in my game. So I want to be as, I don't know how to put it. I want to be the best I can be, but working every day, never be satisfied with myself. And this is a promise I made to myself after I wasted my opportunity in Titan.
Sure. Since you and Existence are both players, well, I mean, we've already described it in this interview, you've both been removed from teams. There's both been periods where people were like, oh, they're not good individual players, no matter how their mind for the game is. And the perception is that the bigger good French teams don't want you, essentially. So you're like the leftover guys, and people probably think, okay, if they want to keep playing, cool, they can play in these separate teams. But, we'll never have to think about them being like at big lands again or top of Pro League or whatever. Do you feel as though the fact that no one really expects much of this team, that in theory, if you were to succeed with this team, you'd probably get even more credit, right? It would be even better legacy for both of you. Yeah,
it's possible, and I honestly do not care much for what people think about the team right now, because I have a huge trust in this lineup. I think we have very, very good individuals. I can see for myself the improvement that we have made in the past weeks. And I know that we have what it takes to go and fight bigger teams. Only thing is, are we gonna work hard enough for it? Are we gonna dedicate ourselves enough to attain the goal? But obviously, having success with that team would be huge. I think for both existence and for me, because like you said, we have been in some dark places and we have been removed from lineups, and I know that a lot of people have basically lost trust in us in a way that, like you say, maybe we cannot be on the top scene anymore. But somehow I feel I can still be there. Somehow I feel I can still play good against the very best players, and I can see Existence playing much better now than he used to be in Titan, and he surprises me a lot. I mean, I can see him put up 35 kills in practice on a regular basis, and sometimes I hope he had that kind of level when we were in Titan. But once again, I was also sometimes I was also not so good in Titan, so I'm not going to go and criticize him for that. But I think we have a team with a good mentality. We have strong individuals. We have some players that really understand the game. We have other players that really hit really hard. I think, for example, Twanu has changed a lot in a good way since its existence joined the team. I did not really consider him a tier 1 AVP before that, but now I can see that he can put up with like basically anyone that's in front of him. So maybe I'm delusional, that's possible, but I am full of hope, and I think if we continue to improve, we are going to establish ourselves as a team to be considered as potential tier 1. I think so.
So one of the storylines that, as someone who was in Titan, must be very aware of, is that all the top players in the French-Belgian scene fought. The real problem we have is there are enough players to make 2 really good teams, but EnVyUs is just hoarding them all. You know, they've got all the star players, so you've got whoever's left over. And then obviously KDS was very good as well, trying to make a really good team in Titan. But then if you're lacking something, if you're lacking a role or an extra bit of firepower, I mean, there wasn't really any options. The whole storyline everyone believed was there isn't really another player you can just go and get. Because the problem is, to put context in for anyone who wasn't around back then, not only was Kaylee banned, but people forget this, but it wasn't just iBuyPower who got banned for match fixing. Like, everyone except Scream in that third French team basically got banned. And so, sure, not many of them were like star players, but they all had a lot of experience in Counter-Strike. They'd all played in top teams. So if you don't have that pool of people to even try someone from, you have to go down to what basically the LDLC guys were like, you know, they should have been the 4th or the 5th best teams, but suddenly they were just like the 3rd. So a lot of those guys had no experience playing at the top level. A lot of them were very young, you know, and they just, like, even if they have some talent, it hasn't developed yet, and no one knows where they're going to be. So not everyone actually thought it's a waste of time taking those guys until they, like, sort of, you know, of their own accord, become really good and prove they're good. No one's going to take them seriously. And so as a result, in teams like Titan, it was just a case of, like, we just have to keep with these players, you know, there's no point changing, or let's hope that we get a player if EnVyUs kicks someone. That's the only real options. Do you think that the rise of people like Body's an obvious one? I mean, XMS most recently. Have we kind of learned that there were more players than we thought in the French-Belgian scene that actually can be good at some point in time? What is your sense in this regard?
Yeah, like you say, I think we have learned that some players, let's put it this way, we have learned that talent can rise into very good players if some players are put with experienced others. For example, everybody was agreeing that Buddy was a very promising and talented players, but they took the risk to bring him, and suddenly he turned into an extremely consistent top players, just because he was surrounded by extremely experienced players and he learned from them. In my opinion, all it takes from being a tier 2 promising player to suddenly being a tier 1 player is to have the right mentality and to have the potential and the talent. That's the combination you need. You need to have a certain potential, and you need to have the right attitude. You need to pick up from other players. You need to listen to other players. They will make you a better player. Maybe you will also help them become a better player because you come with all your hunger and you really want to do something because you're new in there, so you come with a lot of energy. That's, for example, I know Colzera mentioned it about Phelps when he joined. He said he came with a lot of hunger for the game. That also works both ways. And I think finally the French scene realized that some players had a lot of potential and that they were not as worse as they are. You know, maybe some people thought, oh, this LDLC white lineup, Bodhi and Devil, they have some good players, but we don't really know. Maybe they are worse. Maybe they are really worse than us. We cannot play with them. And then suddenly people realize, wait a minute, with my experience, with our experience, and their talent, they can turn into very promising player. And that's when like the holy gates of the tier 1 like French teams kind of opened, when we realized that a lot of other players have talents, but they just need the experience. They need experience to explode and become extremely good players. And I think XMX is a good example. Bodhi is an extremely good example. I've been completely amazed by the level that he had. And in my opinion, I think Alex is a player you have to follow very carefully, because I can see he has a very good sense of the game, and I can see that Existence already had an influence on him. I think it's very refreshing for CS. It's very refreshing to give young players a chance to benefit from your experience, and you basically you combine your experience and their talent, their potential, their hunger for the game, and suddenly you have new superstars maybe.
Okay, so the way you described it here, it makes a lot of sense. Like, the difference is, okay, when they were just on their own, okay, there was no experience in the team. Yeah, it's true. People could look, and if you'd said to someone, if you had to take a player from this team, yeah, then people would be like, okay, maybe I'd try Devil, or maybe I'd try Body. That's why these teams did try them. They were the ones where they, at least left to their own devices, they were still doing something. They were kind of showing that they had some talent. But the thing is, the other players, it's kind of also like you said. So Twinu, for example, he was around a bunch of years, and the difference is, if you watched him, he might have a map that looked pretty promising. You'd be like, oh, maybe I better pin more and then the next 2 maps, you'd be like, oh, not, maybe nothing would happen. Maybe he'd completely fail. Maybe he might even try and do the same things, but it didn't work. So obviously, like, having a system for these guys, or sometimes there's people who are very young who they don't know how to use their own talent. They don't know, like, where should I be, or what should I do when things go wrong. For example, if I'm not hitting my shots. How do you think how is Twinu used in, and Alex and these other players that are potential the stars, how are they used in LDLC? What's the thinking on them?
All I can say is that I know Existence is pushing to have them have as much freedom and liberty as they can. For example, the continuous discussion that we have with Twinu is, do whatever you want to do. If you want to go for a pick, go for it. Practice. If you want to take the round into your own hands, go for it. Same with Alex. If you feel you have a timing, take it. If you have a good strategy you want to use, give it to us. We put it together as a team and we use it. So I think the main focus with those players is to make them feel like they can take the game into their own hands. And yeah, I think that's the most important. I think when Existence gives you the liberty to go and try this move or push through this smoke because you have his trust, then that's where they're gonna learn. Sometimes it's gonna work, sometimes it's not gonna work. They will know the difference. They will like build kind of a banks of individual tricks that they can use later. And also I think that as a new player playing with someone like Existence, which I basically put way higher than me in terms of experience, like he is the one role model. Even if I have some kind of experience, like he's the one that they will listen to, which makes sense. I think he also has a lot of experience as to training methods. How do you practice? How would you analyze your own POV if you need to? That's also like for me, for example, since I joined LDLC, Existence helped me a lot become better and helped me a lot to realize this is one of my problems. This is something I have to improve. This is how I could improve it. So not only is Existence capable of like realizing this is not going so well, but most of the time, if you dedicate yourself to finding a solution, he can also come and help and say, oh, okay. For example, I can come to him and say, Kevin, I really have this issue. Like, I have given it a lot of thoughts and I cannot seem to find a solution right now. Maybe he can come up and say, okay, this is how you can do it. And this capacity of sharing with each other and using your teammate as a resource, this is what I think can make us a very good team. Like, your teammates can have solutions that you don't have. And if you share together in the team, that's where you can basically, everyone makes each other better if it's done the right way.
So even in the last LDLC lineup, they were already having some surprising online results. I mean, they could beat teams like Godsent, for example, who obviously online are a very good team. Well, I mean, very good might be exaggerating. They were a good team, okay? So when we come into this lineup in ESL Pro League Season 5, okay, I don't want to exaggerate too much because the record isn't very good. Like, you've lost most of the games. And it's true that while online play is where the lower teams have a better chance anyway against the top teams, as much as you don't want to be someone who's like, oh, well, we lost, but it was so close and stuff, there have been some pretty close games against the best teams in Pro League, basically. What do you think, what's a realistic expectation for LDLC in Pro League this season?
We are very clear on that, that our main goal is to maintain ourselves in Pro League. That's how it is right now. We want to keep our spot for the next season. I think it's possible. It is definitely possible. Now that we need to take, like I said, we need to take this leap of faith from being capable of beating the best teams to actually beating them. And I think there is no magic in that. I think it comes with experience. For example, the type of losses that we had against Astralis in, I don't know how many overtimes, it was maybe 35, 33. Yeah, it was a lot of overtimes. Then we also lost with a pretty big lead on Fnatic on Inferno. We lost 16-13, leading 11-4, I think. Those kind of losses I have had way earlier in my career with unexperienced teams. For example, we would play against Very Games, and we would lose 14-16 because we couldn't close the game.
Yeah,
this is an exact type of game that unexperienced team kind of fall into, and this is going to come with the time. And this is up to us to immediately learn from the mistakes we did against Astralis and Fnatic, which are, in my opinion, the two maps that we should have won. Both Infernos against Fnatic and Astralis, we could and should have won them. So it is up to us to learn from that immediately and not let it happen again. And if we suddenly are able to close maps where we have the opportunity to, then I think it's very realistic to think we can stay in Pro League for the next season.
I realise the rework of Inferno, it's clearly different to the past one, and no one really has quite figured out like what the biases are on the map or who it's really going to favour. A bunch of teams are playing it, and we're seeing some have some early results, but no one really has just like crushed everyone on the map. But we know from your time in Titan, this was like one of the best maps for existence-led teams. For some reason, even if it was against like Fnatic, who were probably the best team on the map, you guys would always be able to compete, to get upset wins, and somehow you just kind of had that map figured out. Is the fact that LDLC is playing Inferno now, is the mentality like we're going all in on this map, like this is going to have to be one of our best maps? Do you think it does share any similarities with the other version that kind of carry over?
I think it does. Obviously, there has been major changes compared to the previous Inferno. For example, the banana is now way wider, or the pool at the entrance of B is wider, so it's hard to cover it with one smoke. But those changes aside, I think the main principles of the old Inferno still apply to the new one when it comes to rotations, or when it comes to the battle of who is going to keep the smoke the longest. But this is always the principles apply again. I think when you're T, it's always a matter of forcing the CTs to use their utilities. If they don't use it, you have to punish them for it. We kind of see it as the old Inferno, to be honest. I think our way of seeing the map right now is very close to what we did in Titan on the previous Inferno. And I think we put a lot of emphasis on it because we thought that having both Inferno and Nuke in the map pool would be very interesting because it was the two most recent maps.
Yeah.
And whereas some teams might just decide to work on them a little bit later and keep them as a potential veto, we just decided, you know what, we're going to make them very good maps for us. So it gives us some rooms in the veto.
Okay. So at the end of this interview, do you have a final word you want to say, or someone you want to thank or say hello to?
Well, I want to thank, obviously, LDLC for the great opportunity that they have given us. And they take very good care of the players for sure. I want to thank you, obviously, for the interview. I've always thought that maybe one day I would be in one of the Thorin's videos, so I can take that out of my bucket list. This is one thing I have done. And also I want to thank people that still believe in me, because some people have still trust in me, and I think it's very genuine when I say that I I can still do it. I'm gonna work for it, and I hope that everyone's trust that I'm gonna be worth of it.
Okay, Messi.
You're welcome, Doria.
Hey guys, this is Patrick Carnes-Sedermoon. You might know me as the guy with the most IM medals in the world, or something like that. I'm also the CGO of Fnatic, and you're watching Duncan Thorin Shields YouTube channel. Yeah, pleasure being here.